Hi. The film I will be talking about today is Autumn Sonata. This film was written and directed by Ingmar Bergman. It stars Liv Ullmann and Ingrid Bergman. A lot of Bergmans in this film. I've always gotten those two mixed up. They're not even related. It's kind of weird that two people, two giants in the world of cinema, can have a name that similar, no relation, but we'll get back to the film. This film was released in 1978. And I have to say, I've seen other Bergman films like The Seventh Seal, Cries and Whispers, Wild Strawberries. So far, I haven't seen all of them. I've seen the three that I just mentioned, but not all of his films. Of the films that I've seen, this one's my favorite so far. And I just saw it yesterday. I was going to watch 30 minutes of it before I went to bed and then finish it. Couldn't turn it off. And what's interesting about this is it's such a simple premise, but it's anything but a simple film. And it's a film about a topic that several other films in the past, and probably even before, have tackled, but never tackled in such a real, interesting, and authentic way as this film does, about the relationships between mothers and daughters. And not just that, but really on a bigger scale, just parents and children in general. And as this film starts, her husband's breaking the fourth wall, and we see Liv Ullmann, who plays Eva, in the film, sitting at a desk, and he's explaining to the camera that sometimes he just likes to watch her without her knowing it, and how he met her when she was a journalist and she'd been involved with this man before him, and how much he loves her and is grateful to be in her presence, and how that at one time when she came into that house, she said, "This does feel like home." And you get the feeling that he admires her from afar. You don't necessarily know whether the feeling's reciprocated as much as that's enough for him, just simply being in her world and being able to kind of orbit around her, and he'll take whatever he can get. When Liv Ullmann makes an appearance to talk to her husband, Victor, she then informs him that she's going to reach out to her mother to come stay with them for a while. Her mother has recently suffered a loss of her companion of, I believe in the film it says 18 years. And the mother obliges. The mother, played by Ingrid Bergman, probably best known for her role as Ilsa in Casablanca. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard of that film. And she shows up and she's greeted warmly, and it seems as though things are going great from the start. We don't feel any tension between the two of them. And then when they get upstairs and they begin talking, as she's speaking with her mother, she says, Helena's here. And when she says Helena, you see the mom's face change like that. And we find that Eva has a sister, and that Ingrid Bergman, who plays Charlotte in the film's daughter, who is bedridden and can barely communicate, and had been in an asylum, or I don't know if asylum's the right word, but in some type of a hospital where the nurses and people like that would care for her, and Eva got her out of there. She wasn't just going to sit and not see her and wash her hands of it and keep her far away. And when she tells her mother, Charlotte, this, you see her face change completely. She's, how could you do this to me? She was happy there. She was good there. We don't need to do. And that's the first glimpse that we see that her mother puts up walls. And, her mother was telling her about her companion who had died and how they'd shared this time together and what he meant to her. And it's almost as if family is this other thing in the background, but it doesn't really fit into her mom's lifestyle. And as they kind of talk, she's like, it would be good if you could see her and just speak to her. And she kind of obliges. And before they go through the door, she puts this kind of mask on and gets what we would call a game face, and goes through and sees her daughter in this horrible condition, and is somehow tough enough to put on a good face for it. And she gets through it, and it's almost as if her daughter Ava admires this about her mother, that she knows that that's the last place that she wants to be, but she, like an actress, and she describes that later, she was able to transform in that moment. However, the catch to that is the kindness and the emotion that she's showing her daughter and putting on that good, it is an act. It's not coming from a real place. She feels obligated to do it, but it's not coming naturally. It's not just coming from her. And then they exit. And Ingrid Bergman in this film has several dialogues with herself, like, talking out loud without anybody else in the room, kind of these dialogues with herself where she's just speaking, talking to herself. And she's like, how could she do that to me? Why couldn't she have just died when she was in that hospital? Why did I have to see that? She didn't tell me this. She didn't make me aware of this. I'm blindsided. She gets me here and gets me into this situation. I wasn't ready for this. That's not what I came for. What was her aim in that? And she didn't really communicate that there. She was able to put it on. But these are two people who we start to see don't really know each other and are at kind of a wit's end with each other. They communicate and they have their moments, but they're strangers to each other at the same time. There's a veneer that they never drop when they're around the other one. They can only go so far. And then the mother comes down and they're expecting her to be dressed kind of maudlin. She's just lost her lover and things of that. Well, she comes down in a red dress, looks great. And there's a scene where Eva, played by Liv, goes to the piano and plays, and the mom's a pianist. And she says, what did you think? She said, well, I'd like to hear you play something. I loved you, but she criticizes the way that she did it, her interpretation. And then she goes and plays the same thing. And you see Ava watch her. And as she's watching her mother play, she goes from a grown woman to a little girl again. And that thing, can we ever feel like an adult in the presence of our parents? And just watching that with her face, this woman who's probably in her mid-30s by the time this film is made, becomes a child right in front of you as she's sitting there watching her mother play the piano. And it brings up those feelings of inadequacy and how she could never measure up and how her mom is always going to be better than her. And how she'll always be told, I love you, you're my child, but it's that obligatory type of love. I'm not proud of you. I don't think you're talented. I don't think you're this. I don't think you're that. But, thanks for trying. And then later in the film, there's a scene where she and the mother are in the bedroom of her late son, Ava's late son, Eric, who died in a drowning. And the mother cannot understand this. She's like, you've left this room the same way it was when he was alive? And she said, I feel him here. Being in here with this room the way it is, I still feel him here. Her mom can't understand that. Her mom, we see, doesn't want to feel things. Her mom's life has been a study in evading feelings. You don't want to feel. Feelings are something we have, but we choose to acknowledge them. And her mother has never wanted to do this. She almost looks at her daughter as though she's a masochist. Like, why would you do this to yourself? And her daughter, Ava, unlike her mother, does not find happiness in avoiding life. She leans into it. She wants to feel, whether it be good or whether it be bad. She saw what her mother did. She doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to go down that road. She doesn't want to become an ice queen who feels nothing. And then later on in the scene when the mom's getting ready for bed, she's kind of talking about, well, maybe I'll get on my car, maybe I'll do this, or then I'll fly back when I leave and kind of just do this night. It's always a nice gesture that's kind of empty, that's void of any real sentimentality. This just, here you are. And the daughter does not want that. And in the previous scene where they were in the child's room, she even said to her mother, anxiety sets limits on us. And, we still can feel, just like when you were playing that piano, you had to feel that. You couldn't have had that was things without limits. The mom doesn't want to go there. And in the mom's sleep, she has this nightmare that one of her daughters is, come into the room to possibly strangle her, and she wakes up and she kind of makes a noise. She goes downstairs and Ava's there. And at this point, Ava confronts her about the type of mother that she was, or the lack thereof, and explains that she was neglected throughout her childhood. There were no good years. I sat at your feet begging for attention. And it shows a flashback scene, which is really heartbreaking, about she goes in after her mother's finished to speak to her. And the mom gets the paper and says, and she just sits there. She just wants to be in her presence. She wants to know this amazing person that lives in this house with her. And the mom says, go run along and play outside. All she wanted was to just simply be in the room with her, be acknowledged, be a part of her world in some capacity. And the mom couldn't do that. And just kind of said, go. And she starts confronting her with these truths. And Charlotte, you see her face, and Ingmar Bergman does such a good job here of somebody who's hearing it really for the first time and is not prepared. She has done such a good job at insulating herself from this world. And now that somebody has broken through, emotions and this is virginal territory for her. She doesn't know what to do. And she eventually says, well, when I, came back home and quit touring and quit doing that stuff, weren't those your... And she said, no, they were horrible. You said my hair was bad. You made me cut it. You said it was too... You said my teeth were crooked. You made me get braces. They were horrible. You changed the way I dressed. You did this. You imposed. You tried to make up for the time that was lost. All by these changes and trying to remold me. And you weren't trying to get to know me. You were just trying to create this version of me that was more palatable to you. And you see her as she's being leveled with this. And she doesn't know what to say. She's damaged this one irreparably. She can't fix it. And we find it's so interesting because this is a intelligent woman that's telling her it's a good wife, a good mother, loving person, and yet in this moment she's confronting that person that damaged her more than anybody. Who can do it more than a parent? They know what buttons to press. They put those buttons there. And to finally confront the actual perpetrator face to face and get it out in the open, let it hit the air. Watching that scene between those two, you almost forget that you're watching a movie and you feel like you're watching a real mother and daughter come to terms with something. And in that, we find that earlier in Ava's life, when she was involved with this other man, she had gotten pregnant, and the mother pushed her to get an abortion. And we see now why there are so many barriers in this relationship. It's a relationship of obstacles. It's not one where they're there for each other. It's one where they're constantly warring with each other. And at best, all they can really ever be to each other is polite. These two people who should know each other so well are strangers to one another. And it's a relationship that's more about resentment than love. And then it cuts, and Charlotte's on a train with her agent, and she's speaking with him, and finding comfort, she's once again on the road and away from them. She's escaped once more. And then it cuts back to Ava saying, I know I'll never see her again. And it shows her in a graveyard where her son's buried. And then she makes her way back to the house and looks up, sees that the light in the room where Helena stays is on. and she's going to go in there, and she chooses to confront life unlike her mother and not run from it. And she ends up writing a letter to her mother explaining that she will always love her and that she doesn't want her to just fall out of her life. She gives it to the husband to take. And she says, you can read it if you like. And he reads it, and we hear her narration. And then it cuts to a scene of Charlotte's face. And then it cuts back to the husband putting it back in the envelope and leaving. And we don't know what's going to happen. But once again, the child had to be the adult and was willing to do so. And how often is that the case in real life relationships? So I think anybody will identify with this film, whether you're a parent, whether you're not. We've all been a child, so we can at least deal with it in some capacity. You can relate, trust me. You will watch this and you will almost swear you're watching a documentary. It's well worth your time. Until next time, thanks.